What qualities does a parasitic mechanic have? Mark Rosewater answers this question on Blogatog with, it only works with a subset of cards from the set or block that it's in. For example, Splice onto Arcane only worked with Arcane and only existed in the Kamigawa block. As you can see here, these cards only work with themselves. There's a very small subset, 27 in total, and they are an example of something that does not work in the wider world of Magic. Another example of a parasitic mechanic is stickers. These cards recently were banned in a number of formats and were disliked by many players online and in person because of the finicky nature of the mechanic. Another mechanic which is a little bit lower on the sliding scale of parasitism is day and night. This is more of an annoying mechanic than a parasitic one, but nevertheless, these cards work mostly in tandem with each other. It's mostly like a werewolf-style mechanic where you flip the cards back and forth depending on the number of spells cast. It technically works outside of itself, so it's not as parasitic as Splice onto Arcane. But nevertheless, it is a mechanic that is relatively unpopular. Mutate is another mechanic from Ikoria. This works primarily with itself, where whenever the creature mutates, you get an effect. On Gemrazor, whenever a creature mutates, you destroy artifact or enchantment. And so you play Gemrazor, you play Sea-Octopus, you play Migratory Greathorn, all piled onto the same creature, and you do various things. And it's a very complex mechanic. It's fun, but overly complex. Morph is another mechanic which is parasitic in the sense that you have, I think it's Kadena, Slinking Sorcerer, my mistake. There we go. Kadena, Slinking Sorcerer is an example of a parasitic commander that only works with morph and manifest cards, essentially. And so this mechanic is not as bad as Splice onto Arcane right here, but nevertheless, there are not a ton of morph cards in print for Kadena. So the reason I'm talking about this parasitism is that the new Modern Horizons 3 commander decks have recently been spoiled. And what we have here is the Creative Energy deck with Satya, Aetherflux Genius, at the helm. And then there's another commander here, Kaith, Famed Mechanist, which is not strictly energy, but works with energy with the Proliferate mechanic. And so energy is a parasitic mechanic, despite what Reddit says, that they say that Mark Rosewater said that it is not a parasitic mechanic. He just compared it to Splice onto Arcane in that it is not as parasitic. And so why am I making this video? Why does parasitic energy matter, and why do I dislike it? The reason for this is that energy, to me, is just another form of currency like mana. Like we have, the Jeskai mana cost on Satya here, and then you have his energy. And so to me, it's finicky. It's a little bit like stickers, right? Where you have these extra pieces. It's a little like, there's +1 counters. It's as if +1 counters equaled mana. And that I have an issue with. Jumping back really quick to another parasitic mechanic that I feel that Wizards addressed and fixed somewhat is Infect. Infect was parasitic in the sense that you did not want to play non-infect creatures in your Infect strategy. You wanted to put your opponent to 10 infect counters as quickly as you could. And so both of these mechanics work with Proliferate, which is a fantastic mechanic, by the way, which works with any kind of counter. Energy is essentially a charge counter. Infect is kind of like a negative charge counter on the opponent. And so Wizards fixed Infect with Toxic. Toxic means that the creature deals both regular and poison counter damage to the enemy player. And what they do with Toxic is they can change the number on the creature. So, for example, Tyranix Rex is an 8/8 with Toxic 4. So it deals 8 regular and 4 infect, essentially. Well, 4 poison. It's not actually infect. And so this is an example of where Wizards fixed the mechanic and made it much more palatable to gameplay as a whole and working outside of just infect in a regular Magic setting. And so here we have, I'm going to go to the Goldfish site because this loads a little better. A lot of the new cards, let's scroll over here. A lot of the new energy cards actually kind of work by themselves and work without being shoved into an energy-only deck. And then, in addition, Wizards did the clever thing of, essentially reprinting old broken cards in the form of energy cards. So Recurring Nightmare right here. This is the same card as Chthonian Nightmare. It's, well, not the same. It's the same, but transferred to energy. And in an energy deck, Chthonian Nightmare is very, very similar to Recurring Nightmare. Let's look at Allurin. If I spelled that correctly, here we go. Allurin. This is similar to Primal Prayers right here. And it's energy Allurin. And so Wizards kind of found this workaround. They can do powerful effects with energy, with a hoop to jump through, which Recurring Nightmare and Allurin really didn't have much hoop at all. These cards were busted, and I think they were banned in multiple formats. I know for sure Recurring Nightmare is banned in Commander. And so Infect, they're starting to find a workaround to it. However, I feel that there are just not enough good energy cards printed so far. I might have said Infect a second ago, but energy cards in Commander, there's only 135 total. This includes the new cards from the new Commander deck. And so what my issue is that energy cards to me are just they're just like extra game pieces that I don't want to deal with on the board. I don't want to read the card. I don't want to have to keep track of another mana source, essentially, which it's just a second mana pool is what these are. And the thing with energy is that it's not as bad as Splice on Arcane, but it does kind of only work with itself in a way. If you want to have a strong deck, you're going to want most of your cards to produce energy. And that's fine, and that's fun. It's kind of like a tribal synergy. It's like, oh, I'm playing Angel Tribal. Okay, you're only going to play Angels, right? But they don't print energy in every set. Until recently, they only had, I think, 60-odd energy cards. This is, before... Okay, so this, in the most recent years, the most recent year and a half, they've printed 64 additional energy cards. So before that, there was only about another 60 energy cards. And so they've doubled the number of energy in the past couple of years. Great. Okay. Unless Wizards continues to print energy, we are going to be stuck in a situation where I just have no interest in playing these new cards. For example, the Wizards site does not load very well. Satya here. So, outside of an energy deck, this does work. It does create a tapped and attacking token. But you're going to have to sacrifice it unless you have energy. So you're heavily incentivized to build the energy in there. Gonti's Ether Heart. This one can work technically by itself with artifacts. See, this is the thing. Energy is kind of half and half. And it just kind of like bothers me that I have to keep track of all this stuff. I don't know. I suspect that the energy deck here will be perhaps the third or fourth least popular of the new Modern Horizons set. Eldrazi Incursion is obviously going to be number one. I think it's the highest price. Tricky Terrain will be number 2, I believe. And then the Graveyard Overdrive Lurgoyf deck. This one actually might be number 4. I think Energy might be 3. Energy is just so wonky. So looking at the themes for EDH Rec, let's just go quickly to this. You have the number 1 theme is artifacts. You have 151,000 decks to the name of artifacts. Scrolling down the list. How long until we get to energy? Let's find out. Let's just keep scrolling. I actually know the answer to this. It's below land destruction decks. This is how unpopular energy was, and to be fair, it wasn't supported very much. Right here, 3,500 energy decks. This is a tiny, tiny fraction of the artifact of like the top decks up here. The reason for this is there weren't enough energy cards printed in the past, and players had to resort to cards like Atraxa, perhaps I don't know if it's the best designed commander, but the most alluringly designed commander ever printed, in order to run their energy decks, because Atraxa proliferates, and again, proliferate is probably one of the most elegant Magic mechanics because it works with everything. It just kind of glues all of these disparate different counters together, and so yeah, before that you were kind of limited to this type of style of deck, and so now we have Satya, the Jeskai energy deck, and this unfortunately doesn't work with Atraxa, but and there's a couple of good green cards with energy, but this will I think this is going to start to pave the way for more energy, and I suspect that Wizards will eventually print a 5-color energy monstrosity similar to Ululek, in which you can play Atraxa, you can play all the green stuff, and then players will, energy will continue to gain in popularity. I am just not a huge fan of this style of card because it's just one more thing to keep track of. There's already so much on the board. It's not the thing that makes this worse than +1 counters is that +1 counters just kind of sit on the creature. You don't have to worry about spending them. You put them on and you want to accumulate. Energy you want to accumulate and spend. And it's just one extra thing that I don't want to worry about. So what do you guys think in the audience? What do we think of parasitic mechanics as a whole? What do we think of the Modern Horizons 3 Creative Energy deck? Do we think this is going to be a popular deck? Are you guys going to buy it? What do you think about energy?